And you want to do the all together now? Om Jnanatirmandasya Jnanjana Salakaya Chakshuruntam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Vishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kiramayam Dharati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shakajataha Sahagana Raghunatha Vaitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Vaijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Tivamscha Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Dapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Stuti Devi Pranami Nam Hari Pre Vanchakalpa Tirubhashcha Vipasandadevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 11, the universal form, texts 1 and 2. And I'll just go through text 1, and then anybody who wants to repeat that can repeat it. Then I'll go through text 2, and then we'll do the translation and purport of each verse. So, Arjuna Vacha Mad Anugrahaya Pramam Guyam Adhyatma Samjikam Yat Vayoktam Vakastaina Mahoyam Vigato Mama Arjuna Vacha Mad Anugrahaya Pramam Guyam Adhyatma Samgitam Yat Vayoktam Vachashtena Mohoyam Vigato Mama. If anybody'd like to repeat that, go ahead. Arjuna Vacha Madhunugrahaya Paramam Guyam Adhyatma Samgitam Yat Vayoktam Vachashtena Mohoyam Vigato Mama. Anybody else? Arjuna Vacha Madhunugrahaya Paramam Guyam Adhyatma Samgitam Yat Vayoktam Vachashtena Mohoyam Vigato Mama. Text 2. Prabhapyayo hi bhutanam Shruto Vishtaroso Maya Tata Kamala Prachaksha Mahatmyam Api Chavyayam Bhava Prayo hi bhutanam Shruto Vishtaroso Maya Tvata Kamala Prachaksha Mahatmyam Api Chavyayam. Anybody else? So we'll start with text 1. It says, Arjuna Uvacha. Arjuna said, Mat Anugrahaya, just to show me favor. Paramam, supreme, Guyam, confidential subject. Adyatma, spiritual. Samgitam, in the matter of. Yat, what? Tvaya, I, you. Uktam, said. Vachaha, words. Tena, by that. Moha, illusion. Ayam, this. Digita, is removed. Mama, my. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna said, by my hearing the instructions you have kindly given me about these most confidential spiritual subjects, my illusion has now been dispelled. So repeat. Arjuna said, by my hearing the instructions you have kindly given me about these most confidential spiritual subjects, my illusion has now been dispelled. Purport by His Divine Grace, ACBSP. This chapter reveals Krishna as the cause of all causes. He is even the cause of the Mahavishnu, from whom the material universes emanate. Krishna is not an incarnation. He is the source of all incarnations. That has been completely explained in the last chapter. Now, as far as Arjuna is concerned, he says that his illusion is over. This means that Arjuna no longer thinks of Krishna as a mere human being or as a friend of his, but as the source of everything. Arjuna is very enlightened and is glad that he has such a great friend as Krishna. But now he was thinking that although he may accept Krishna as the source of everything, others may not. So in order to establish Krishna's divinity for all, he is requesting Krishna in this chapter to show his universal form. Actually, when one sees the universal form of Krishna, one becomes frightened, like Arjuna. But Krishna is so kind that after showing it, he converts himself again into his original form. Arjuna agrees to what Krishna has several times said. Krishna is speaking to him just for his benefit. So Arjuna acknowledges that all this is happening to him by Krishna's grace. He is now convinced that Krishna is the cause of all causes and is present in everyone's heart as Supersoul. Now, text 2. Bhava, appearance. Apyayo, disappearance. He, certainly. Bhutanam, of all living entities. Shuto, have been heard. Vishtarasha, in detail. Maya, by me. Tvata, from you. Kamala Patra Aksha, O lotus-eyed one. Mahatmyam, glories. Api, also. Cha, and Avyayam, inexhaustible. And translation by Srila Prabhupada. O lotus-eyed one, I have heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity, and have realized your inexhaustible glories. Please repeat. O lotus-eyed one, I have heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity, and have realized your inexhaustible glories. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila ACBSP Swami Prabhupada. Arjuna addresses Lord Krishna as Lotus Eye, which Krishna's eyes appear just like the petals of a lotus flower, out of his joy. For Krishna has assured him in a previous chapter, Aham Kritsnasya Jagata Prabhava Palayastata, which means, I am the source of the appearance and disappearance of this entire material manifestation. Arjuna has heard of this from the Lord in detail. Arjuna further knows that in spite of his being the source of all appearances and disappearances, he is aloof from them. As the Lord has said in the 9th chapter, he is all-pervading, yet he is not personally present everywhere. That is the inconceivable opulence of Krishna, which Arjuna admits that he has thoroughly understood. So this chapter, the Universal Form, is a very mystical chapter. It's a very mystical description, actually. In fact, it reminds me of how sometimes you'll see, I don't know about here in India, but in the West, you'll see these advertisements in New Age magazines or Indian newspapers, where even the Indian guru will talk about, giving you the means to achieve cosmic consciousness. Cosmic consciousness. So who wouldn't want cosmic consciousness? So they try to entice you to come in and be a part of their program so you can get cosmic consciousness. But until they understand the Vishvarupa, or the universal form, they don't know what cosmic consciousness means. Because in the universal form, you see all the demigods, all the planets, the source of creation, you see the destruction of everything, you see the creation of all living entities, and everything that's in the cosmos is there within the cosmic manifestation, or the universal form. And of course, we know also the universal form, though it is all about showing the power of Krishna, it's still, nonetheless, a temporary form. It's not the eternal form. It only exists as long as the cosmic manifestation exists. So when anybody tells you about cosmic consciousness, basically, once again, it means through this we can understand that they're talking about a temporary form of enlightenment, a temporary perspective of how consciousness pervades everything, but still it is not the spiritual aspect, it is not the spiritual form, and certainly not the spiritual or the eternal form of Lord Krishna. That's why when Arjuna sees this universal form, he becomes frightened. Now, is that the position that God wants us to have, being frightened? Because in Bhakti Yoga, as far as I know, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, it's all about attaining the love of God. How can you attain love for something that you're frightened of? So this is the difference here. Krishna, Krishna is bluish. So why is Krishna bluish? Who knows why Krishna is bluish? Anybody know? There's different answers. So there's, no answer is necessarily wrong. But does anybody know why Krishna is blue? Chandrasekhar, you know why Krishna.
There's different answers for those.
Right, I know.
Because the sky's blue, it's his eternal prerogative.
He's blue because that is the color of eternal, loving nature. Krishna is the God of love. And Krishna is blue because he has never-ending and unconditional love for his parts and parcels, which includes you and me. Of course, on the other hand, remember, he reciprocates as we surrender unto him. So in other words, the more love we give to Krishna, the more love he gives back to us. That's the whole purpose of Bhakti Yoga. So, and the whole purpose of that is to know how to love Krishna so that we can have an eternal reciprocal relationship with him. Now, you can't necessarily have an eternal reciprocal relationship with something that causes you fear. And we can also understand that in many religions, that is the conception of God. That's why they're called fear-based religions. And that's usually the conventional monotheistic religions that right now seem to pervade much of the world. We're going to change that, though, as we proceed to spread Krishna consciousness. But the point of it is, you cannot have an eternal loving relationship with something that you're afraid of. You may have awe and reverence, you may have respect, you may feel that, I better do what God tells me to do, otherwise he's going to send me to eternal damnation or something like that. But you notice that that's not really how it's described in the Bhagavad Gita. Basically, you create your own future, you create your own relationship with God simply by developing a loving and surrendering nature towards God. It's up to you. Krishna's basically just waiting for you to, wake up. And so in this chapter we find that now Arjuna has been completely enlightened. His illusion has been dispelled because, as Prabhupada explains, Arjuna finally understands that Krishna is not just his friend, he's a devoted. Arjuna is devoted to his friend. But he's more than that. Krishna is the source of all worlds, all living entities. He's the sum and substance of everything. He pervades the whole universe. So now he's becoming enlightened. And so he asks, can you please show me this universal form? And not everybody can attain this vision of this universal form. And not everybody can attain this cosmic consciousness, which some people declare to be able to give to everybody else. So later in the chapter, Krishna explains that now I give you divine eyes. And with divine eyes, you can see my universal form. So this is basically the whole process of the Vedic path. The Vedic path, naturally, is meant to deliver people from the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion to the mode of goodness. And with the right sadhana, the right instructions, it propels you into the mode of pure goodness, Siddhasattva. Then you can begin to start seeing things as they are. Because remember, the modes of material nature are like different frequencies that pervade this planet. And if you're primarily situated in the mode of tamas, or ignorance, or rajas, or passion, or sattva, or goodness, that is the frequency level in which your consciousness exists. Some people say that, oh yes, I live in a house, or I live in my clothes, or I live here or there. The point of it is, where you really live is up here in your consciousness. That's where you really live, because that's how you function, and that's how you project your vision of what goes on around you and how you interact with other people. It is your consciousness. And depending on which mode of nature you're in, that's the frequency level in which you exist, and in which you perceive things, and also in which you project your personality, your actions, your activities, and things like that. So the whole point of the Vedic system, and Bhakti Yoga in general, is to reach the level by which our consciousness becomes purified, or spiritualized. Because just remember this one thing: if this is all you get out of this class, then I'll be happy. The point is, the more spiritual you become, the more you can perceive that which is spiritual. Do you understand that? The more spiritual our consciousness becomes, the more we enter into that frequency level in which we're always acting and perceiving things from a spiritual perspective. And when we begin to act and interact on that level, then basically we can perceive that which is spiritual. Because remember, the material world is temporary, the spiritual world is eternal, but it also pervades everything. It's like when I was talking about frequencies. Have you ever seen a chart of frequencies? It goes from long wave radio waves, to all the way up to short wave. It includes ultraviolet, infrared, radio waves, television waves, all these different things are included. And in that big chart, it's like this. If this was a chart from that end to that end, there'd be a little section right about here where you can see the colors of black, white, pink, red, green. It's only a little fragment of that whole chart of different frequencies which exist. And that's also like the frequencies of the Lord's material nature. So within those frequencies, we begin to enter into the spiritual levels so that we can perceive and interact on that spiritual dimension. And the more spiritual we become, then the more we can perceive that which is spiritual. An example of that is Srila Prabhupada. He once said that, I can see when we offer the bhoga to the deities, I can see the deities partake of the offering, but you cannot. That's the difference. He's already existing in the spiritual dimension, and we are simply looking up trying to get there. But the point of it is, if we follow this path of Bhakti Yoga properly, and if we become even a little bit successful, then we can start having a glimpse into that spiritual dimension. Most of the pujaris, for example, when a pujari has been working with the deities for years, they can usually begin to tell when the deities are happy about something, when they're not happy about something, or when something is troubling the deities, something's going on somewhere because they're not looking happy. Oh, you can tell. Yes, I can tell. The pujaris get to know the deities that way. In other words, they're beginning to see that spiritual dimension which exists all around us. So it's like the radio waves. Somebody may say, well, I don't believe in radio waves. I think you're full of poppycock, you know? But then at the same time, if you have a receiver, then not only can you pick up the radio waves, but there's so many things you can do with them. So the mind, the consciousness is like the receiver that we need to develop so that we can receive and interact in that spiritual dimension. Then we can also begin to see the deities actually interact with us or interact with those that are serving them. Sometimes people can see the deities look at the different devotees in front of them during darshan. Or sometimes other things begin to happen. And anybody that's on the path of Bhakti Yoga will definitely at some point begin to have their own spiritual experiences with the deities, or with their own understanding, their own perception of what spiritual life is all about. And that is what's expected of the Vedic path. The Vedic path expects you not to simply start with faith, but to start with faith and then end with spiritual realizations, your own spiritual realizations. It's not a religion which bases itself on faith, beginning with faith and ending with faith, which many religions do. Because they don't want you to have your own spiritual experiences, because then they lose control. Many of these religions that we see today are basically political operatives. They give you enough information to think that you're making progress, but no. You cannot have any direct relationship with God except through the institution, through the church, through the pastor, or through the Vatican, if you want to put it that way. You know? But in Bhakti Yoga especially, under the guidance of the spiritual master, you become empowered to begin to have your own spiritual experiences. Just like Nandanandan Swami the other day was saying that how much are you absorbed in Krishna? We're in Vrindavan, how much absorbed are we in Krishna? How can we waste our time being absorbed in anything else? Anything else meaning, too much shopping or too much eating or, these kind of things. Krishna is here, we want to just simply become absorbed in Krishna. Because the more we become absorbed in Krishna, then the more spiritual our consciousness becomes, and the more we can begin to directly see that Krishna is everywhere. Everywhere in Vrindavan. So while you're in Vrindavan, basically, as long as you don't make Vaishnava aparad, or offenses to the holy Dham, basically you can hardly not make any advancement while you're here. Even with every breath you breathe, by being in Vrindavan, showing respect for the holy Dham, respect for the devotees, respect for the fact that this is Krishna's holy land, you cannot help but make spiritual advancement. That's the advantage of Bhakti Yoga. So basically, as long as we don't make any offenses to other Vaishnavas or to the holy Dham, then basically there's no way we're going to be able to do anything except continue to make it spiritual advancement. And for those of us that are getting older, we can figure, well, I only got maybe 10 or 20 years left. You know, if I can just hang on, you know, I'm going to be making some progress. I'm going to be out of here by the time it's time to give up this body. As long as I don't blow it by making too many offenses. So this is the advantage of Bhakti Yoga. It is meant to bring you to the position where you have the divine eyes that Krishna is giving to Arjuna, wherein he can see the universal form. But once again, the universal form is frightening. It's not something that you can fall in love with. That's why at the end, when Arjuna sees Krishna's universal form, he says, kindly, kindly let me see that original form of yours. So that's the form that he's attracted to. So then Krishna again reduces his energy and shows his forearm form and then his two-arm form. And that's the form that Arjuna is very familiar with. He's in love with that form, just as we can become in love with that same form, because Krishna is the God of love. And you don't see that. The fact of the matter is, you can't say that about anybody else. You can't say that about Shiva, Brahma, you can't say that about Ganesh, you can't say that about any other of the divinities in Vedic culture. The only God of love there is, really, is Krishna. And that's what he's here for. Simply so that we can fall in love with Krishna. By understanding him, understanding his personality, understanding his activities, his pastimes, his characteristic, his form, and by also purifying, remember, we have to purify our consciousness so that we can attain that love and see this spiritual nature of God. So then, the whole point, remember, is that by engaging in proper sadhana, well, what is the purpose of sadhana? You know, that's another thing. What is the purpose of sadhana? If you want to purify your consciousness, if you want to purify your mind, what do you first have to do? You first have to purify your activities. This is the whole point of sadhana. You purify your activities on the outside, it begins to affect and purify or spiritualize on the inside, the consciousness, so that eventually you can attain that vision of Krishna as the God of love, a loving partner for you, and a means by which we can also enter into that spiritual platform and actually see and perceive things on that spiritual dimension. That is really the whole process of sadhana, sadhana bhakti. Purifying the activities on the outside so that we can purify and then spiritualize our consciousness on the inside. Because remember, the consciousness is where we live. We may live in a house and this and that, but our consciousness is where we live because we take that wherever we go. Everywhere we go in our waking hours, our sleeping hours, or whatever, it's the consciousness where you reside. And it's the consciousness which will dictate what you're thinking of, how you interact with others, and what is attracting you, what is repulsing you. All these different things is based simply on that. So if we can raise our consciousness, especially to Sudasattva, which is beyond mere Tamagun, Rajagun, and Sattvagun, then we can actually begin to enter into that spiritual dimension and see and perceive that on all the different levels. So that's the success of Bhakti Yoga. That's more so than any of the other yoga systems. Because many of the yoga systems are like what I call mechanical systems. In other words, they can take you up to a point based on your own initiative. But Bhakti Yoga is the process by we don't simply engage in our own initiative, but we engage in it to the point where we ask Krishna, kindly help us. Kindly help me. Kindly give me your blessings so that I can enter into that spiritual dimension, so I can enter into the spiritual world. Because you can't get into the spiritual world on your own. It's like trying to see the president of India or the president of the United States. You know, if he doesn't want to see you, there's just no way you're getting in. But if he does want to see you, there's no way that anybody can prevent it. So in the same way, when we want to enter into the spiritual world, if we can get Krishna's blessings to help us, which is what Bhakti Yoga is also all about, then there's no way it can be prevented from us getting into the spiritual world. There's no other system that works that way. Not Jnana Yoga, certainly not Raja Yoga, not Karma Yoga. They don't work that way. They are like systems based on your own initiative, whatever you can get out of them, up to the point where you need Krishna's help. And that's where Bhakti Yoga comes in. So in other words, Prabhupada always used to say, whatever system you're following, simply add Bhakti Yoga to it. That's the means by which any other system becomes successful. But any system without Bhakti Yoga will never be completely successful. You know, it's just like they say in Jnana Yoga, Jivan Mukta. That's the success of Jnana Yoga, to be a liberated soul. That essentially means, if you analyze it according to Jnana Yoga, it means that you've realized your spiritual identity, and through that system, you've become liberated from the false identity. And maybe if you're lucky, if you're really good at it, you'll become liberated from the material energy and become free from samsara. But that doesn't mean you establish your relationship with Krishna. It doesn't mean you enter into Vaikuntha. It doesn't mean you enter into Goloka Vrindavan. This is the difference. So all these different systems can take you up to a certain level, and after that, without Bhakti Yoga, they are incomplete. And Prabhupada once said that all the other systems are nothing more than steps of purification that can then lead you into the process of Bhakti Yoga. So I've been, over the years, studying all these different systems, and I can safely say that without Bhakti Yoga, you will not get the rasa. You will not get the relationship that is offered through Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness. These other systems just don't offer it. They may offer much knowledge regarding karma and the modes of material nature and freedom from the material energy, but they do not offer the nectar, the relationship with Krishna that is achievable through Bhakti Yoga, especially when we take shelter of a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada. So this is our goal, this is the means, and this is the instruction in this 11th chapter of the Universal Form, which we'll proceed to go through later with other speakers that will give you further insight into that. But without achieving the divine vision that Krishna gives to Arjuna, he cannot see the Universal Form. And without achieving our spiritual consciousness, we also cannot see anything beyond the deity as made of mere stone. We may have theoretical knowledge that it's much more, the deity is much more than stone. But at the same time, we need to see that for ourselves. One time Prabhupada asked the devotees on a morning walk, he says, how do you know Krishna is God? And of course the devotees very logically said, because he says so. He says so right here in Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada said, no, that's not the answer. Well, because Srimad Bhagavatam describes Krishna as being the Supreme Personality. So we know Krishna is God. Prabhupada said, no, that's still the wrong answer. So then they were perplexed. The devotees didn't know. Well, okay, now, what is the right answer? How do we know Krishna is God? So the point Prabhupada was making is, how do you know? How are you convinced Krishna is God? And Prabhupada simply said, because of the reciprocation. Because of that rasa, because of that relationship. That's how you'll know Krishna is God. Prabhupada once in another place said that basically until you have your own, rasa, your own reciprocation, you can begin to see it in so many different ways. Just like people have problems, they go in front of the deities, and I've seen this many times where they go in front of the deities, maybe they just need a resolution for their visa, or maybe they're looking for a child, or maybe they're looking for, a means to make car payments, or it doesn't matter. But they go in front of the deities, and they pray, and their problem is resolved. That's a reciprocation. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, even those that have materialistic desires, if they come to me, they're great souls. So, but the point of it is, until we have that experience, only then will we really have that conviction. And you can have it personally, or you can have it through someone like Srila Prabhupada. You can see his conviction, you can see his experience, he will relate that to you, and because you're convinced of him, you'll also become convinced of the process. And then you'll also become convinced that Krishna is the supreme divine lover. So, of course, on the other hand, Prabhupada, the next day on the morning walk, when he had that conversation, he once again said, so how do you know Krishna is God? The devotees, having had the experience from the previous day, well, because of the reciprocation, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said no. How do we know Krishna is God? Because he said so in Bhagavad Gita. Which simply means, don't try to outthink the spiritual master. You know, don't try to think that you know what the spiritual master is going to say, or more than the spiritual master. Let him tell you, let him reveal it to you, and things will go much more smoothly. You'll make much more advancement that way. But the point was that you know Krishna is God by witnessing or by experiencing the reciprocation that Krishna gives to others. And that's what makes you convinced. It's like if someone says to you, how do you know the sun rises in the east? Well, I've seen it. I'm convinced. But until someone has seen it, he may be able to become gullible enough to believe any damn thing. No, the sun doesn't rise in the east. It rises in the northeast, up northeast. That's where that's where it rises from. But until you see it rising in the east, then you know that there's no more argument. There's no more being gullible or being taking a chance of listening to someone else. They may say whatever, but you know the sun rises in the east. As soon as you're experienced somewhat on the spiritual level, you know that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, the supreme lover. No one can tell you otherwise, and you're convinced of that. Then you participate in the process of Bhakti Yoga with full conviction. And when you can do that, then there's no stopping you from making any further lack of progress. You'll definitely make more progress with that conviction on the process of Bhakti Yoga than ever before. And that's what we're waiting for. That's what we need. Otherwise, you start with faith, but you have to proceed further than just faith alone. You have to have conviction, either from the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, from Krishna himself, or through the example and teachings of Srila Prabhupada, or combined with that, you begin to have your own experiences with the deity. And I wrote one book, Krishna deities and their miracles, how Krishna interacts with their devotees. And it's just a book based on so many stories of how Krishna interacted with his devotees. From years ago, maybe a couple hundred years ago, or even modern stories from the devotees that are in ISKCON today. So anybody can get that book. It's on Amazon.com. And you can begin to understand how Krishna interacts with his devotees on so many different levels, in so many different ways. And that's another way of becoming more convinced of the potency and the interrelationship you can have with Krishna. So anyway, that's for those that don't know. Of course, my name is Sri Nandanandan, but for those that don't know, my name is also Stephen Knapp, and I've written a number of books on Vedic culture, about 24 now. So that's one of the books that I've come out with as my opposition to impersonalism. Because if you're an impersonalist, then basically you won't be convinced that Krishna is God, and you certainly won't be convinced that Krishna has a relationship and can interact with everybody else. But if Krishna is not a personal God, then how can so many people from years ago up to modern times have so many different personal examples and experiences with Krishna acting in so many different ways? It's not possible. Krishna is the supreme Godhead. Krishna is the most lovable object. And he does interact with his devotees. So these stories, there's so many stories, and there's so many more that are out there. I did a session at the Festival of Inspiration in New Vrindavan last year. And so I opened the session with different examples of how Krishna interacted with their devotees. And then I asked different devotees to come up and start giving their own experiences. And so many people, so many of the devotees had relationships with the deity in so many different ways that it became very inspiring. You know, the festival is supposed to be a festival of inspiration. So I thought, well, let's start with something inspirational. And so many devotees had stories of how the deity interacted with them, showed them different things, or came into their dreams. So it can happen to you. Maybe it already has. Maybe you've already had these experiences. And if you haven't, then if people have, so many devotees have already had them, then you can just imagine what's waiting for you if you continue to develop your Krishna consciousness on the path of Bhakti Yoga. So it can happen to others, it can happen to anyone who is sincere. And you can talk to any one of these pujaris that are here in this temple, and many of them have already had experiences. So does that mean they're getting divine eyes, like was given to Arjuna to see the Vishvarupa? In some ways, yes. They might not see the universal form. Of course, they're probably not interested in seeing the universal form. They're simply interested in interacting with the deity of Radha Shyamasundar, Krishna Balaram, or Gauranitai in their service. And that continues to happen. So this is why I call the book Krishna Deities and Their Miracles. Because some religions seem to have the idea that they have a monopoly on miracles. Well, quite honestly, they haven't seen anything yet. Quite honestly, there are so many miracles in Krishna consciousness and Bhakti Yoga that you can't even begin to document or count them all. So this is what the meaning is of divine eyes, seeing the personality and seeing the loving reciprocation that Krishna can give to not only his devotee Arjuna, but also to Srila Prabhupada, to our whole parampara, and even to regular devotees that may be sitting amongst us right now. So don't give up, don't lose heart, always be positive, work towards it, because basically, if we all help each other attain a higher level of Krishna consciousness, a higher level of spiritual perception, then basically if I help you and you help me and we all help each other, it creates a very strong atmosphere of positivity. And it propels us to keep working in this way. So we can share our stories like this, we can share our inspiration, we can share our, just like last night, we can share our experiences that we've had with Srila Prabhupada. That's the easiest way to get started. And then we can also share our experiences with the deity of Lord Krishna. And with that, we become convinced, and with our convinced nature, we become eager to engage in devotional service to Lord Krishna. So I'm not going to go on for too long. It's almost 6 o'clock now. And one of my favorite arti is the Gaur arti here at Vrindavan. I always like to stand in the back and just watch the deities and watch the people come and become enthused by seeing the deities. It's amazing. So many people from villages, cities, all over, come into this temple and just become enthused by the kirtan, seeing the deities, how beautiful they are, how nicely dressed they are. And that itself inspires me. So, and we can see sometimes the people come in and they start dancing, and and you wonder how many times has that ever happened in their lives, where they come in and they start dancing in front of the deity or dancing to the kirtan. So it's definitely very powerful effects. So anyway, I like to stand in the back at 6:30 and watch the RT and watch the deities and watch the people become enlivened by being in front of the deities and hearing the kirtan. And then I go away more enlivened after that myself. So we have a few minutes. Is there any comments or questions anybody would like to make?
Yeah.
Chandrasekhar, he's my friend from many, many years ago.
Sri Nandanandan is so kind. He gives cases and cases of books to our prison ministry. And I have 500 scoundrels that I just love to associate with, who are all inmates in the American jails, who just love this guy. Never met him. But they just love your books. They're profoundly affected by them. And you've been giving books for years, and I'm deeply appreciative. And to hear that one of your specific missions is to defeat impersonalism, I mean, how many people are doing that? But you should all feel that you're also capable. Our generation of devotees are passing away. Rama Katie passed away the other day, and but you should feel Ustadi Bocha. Rama Kelly. Yeah, New Talmud. Ustadi Bocha, you were once blind, but now you become the coach. So as we're leaving the scene, you should also aspire to write. Prabhupada came to defeat impersonalism, and that's what his disciples do. Deeply appreciative to Sri Nandanandan for all the work that he's doing. These books are powerful that he produces, so please, I'm going to ask you to tell one story from that book, but I'm going to say one thing. I was in New Vrindavan looking at the deities, and Radharani looked upset, and the Radha Krishna Pujari was just passing by me, and I go, Prabhu, and she goes, yeah, I know, she's upset, something's going on.
Whoa.
One time Prabhupada came to a mandir, and he was there just having darshan, turned to the pujari who was next to him, and he said, what is the mood of the deity? Pujari said, I don't know. It was way back in the 70s. You know, Prabhupada said, what, you don't know? You're the pujari. You should know the mood of the deities. So every one of us should have them.
Yeah, exactly.
How things are going.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I'm glad I can give assistance to as many people as possible through my writing and stuff. I started writing because I didn't think I was a very good speaker. I'm not a very good speaker. I'm a better writer. I just remain in the background. And quite honestly, I like being a background man. I don't like being up front. I don't like being the center of attention. So I thought, writing would be the good way to try to reach as many people as possible without actually going from person to person. Because I can't remember anything anyway. I'll be honest, I write books because I can't remember anything. So that way I can repeat things through the writing of the book without having to repeat things verbally. But so it's been my preaching mission to work like that. And I've got a few pamphlets, you might say. I've got a huge website. If anybody's got note and paper, they can write this down. But it's www.Stephen, that's Stephen, hyphen, NAP, KNAPP.com. It's a huge website. And, or if you want, you can take one of these. You might have to share it with others because I don't have too many. And inside is a list of some of the books. But in that book, Krishna Deities and Their Miracles, I can relate a couple stories. One was with Chintamani Devi Dasi. She had little Lord Jagannath deities in Japan. And she helped open the Japan temple. And this was a story that wasn't told last night. But one time she was thinking, she was making the Raj Bhoga offering in Japan, and she was thinking, do the deities really accept this offering? Are they really waiting? What difference does it make if I'm late or not? And so she's in the kitchen, and she hears this plop. She goes out and looks around. There's nobody there, because the only other two devotees were Siddhama and Bali Mardan. They were out on Sankirtan. So she's going like, what the heck? Okay, nothing. So she goes back in and cooks. She's cooking again. She hears another plop. And she goes, now, wait a minute. That's the second time I heard it. And something's going on. She goes out and she sees that Lord Balaram, the deities are on 2 steps. Lord Balaram is down 2 steps. And he's looking towards the kitchen. And she's going like, okay, I get the message. I'll, keep going, get this offering on time. The deities aren't fooling around. I gotta, do my part. So there's another story that I got from Malati. Most of you, I think, know who Malati is. But she was She was in England at the time, heading up a women's Sankirtan party. And it was really, really cold. And they'd been spending the nights in the van in really cold weather. So they got a heater. They got a kerosene heater. And so they're all excited. Oh, right, we got a nice warm evening tonight. So they fire up the heater, and they're getting ready to go to bed. Now it's nice and warm. And so in the nighttime, she sees Gornitai coming down the road doing kirtan. They're coming down the road, and first thing you know, they're saying, get up, it's time for Mangal Arti. And she's so tired that she can't get up. And then pretty soon, I think it was Lord Nityananda. He said, get up, it's time for Mangal Arti. And he kicks her. And she rolls practically out of the van. And then she realizes something's wrong. So she gradually opens the door, falls out of the van, and realizes that they're all inebriated from the fumes from the kerosene heater. And that if they would have stayed there, they would have all died. So they were specifically woken up by the deities in such a way that they were saved from, dying from asphyxiation. So these are just a couple of the stories. These are modern stories, and there's a bunch of old stories when, say like in Jaipur, the Govindaji deity started to appear playing in an orchard somewhere. A farmer had an orchard, and everything that was in the orchard was specifically to be offered to Govindaji. And then one time, he found two kids, playing in the orchard. So he's going out there, I'm going to get those kids, teach them a lesson. This orchard is not for those kids, this is for Govindaji. And so he's chasing him, and then meanwhile, he goes to see Govindaji, and he sees that at the feet of Govindaji are all these peels of apples. And he realizes, oh my gosh, it was Radha Govinda in the orchard, playing, taking the fruits without my permission. Because the thing of it is, some people wonder why Krishna steals. The fact of the matter is, for Krishna, it's more fun. It's just more fun. Why should he wait on the altar to be offered everything when he can play the part of a thief and go out and steal things from people and get them agitated and then reveal that, hey, it was me all along, You wanted me to do this anyway, and here I am, showing you who I am and what I can do. So this is all part of Krishna's nature. It's more reciprocal. It's more fun for Krishna to reciprocate in this way than it is merely to wait on the altar and accept the offerings and things like that. He does that, and he accepts your offerings, but if he's really merciful, he'll play with you. And there's so many stories, many stories like that are also in my book, Krishna Deities and Their Miracles. And you can also get, what is the name of that book by O.B.L. Kapoor? Experiences in Bhakti. Yeah, I think you can get it downtown here in Loy Bazaar. Experiences in Bhakti, which also has a number of different stories of the same nature. So it's interesting.
Why don't you pass me the mic, because
Sure.
it'll be too complicated for you to repeat it on. And you didn't give us the other one.
So since you won't catch me at a festival of inspiration, I couldn't tell this story there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So this is a simple story, basically. I was serving in Nairobi for a couple of years in the middle 70s, and I was a cook. I was also the driver, and I also used to go out for Madhukari. I used to come back only if my Datsun pickup was full. So the temple president would never give money, so I had to go out and get donations. Since I was a cook, I would use the Maha sweets. Boy, the brahmacharis hated me for that. I would take... Anyway, I would be so tired by the time I would get home, and I would have to cook the Mangal Arti sweets and whatever. And then by the time I would go to sleep, and then I'd dream of what I was going to be cooking. the next day. I was pretty well engaged. So one day, the pujari, one of the women, because the women were mainly the pujaris in those days, named Suchi Devi. She came to me and she said, it seems like, because I was the cook, it seems like everybody's gaining weight except for you. I always had a digestive problem. So then she said, in fact, we had to let out Radharani's skirt. It was too tight for her. So I thought, oh, that's really far out. So that was one simple experience. I know there must be a lot of people who have similar experiences also.
Yeah, I've heard of other deities gaining weight too. We had to actually let the clothes out because the deities were gaining weight. The clothes didn't fit anymore. So,
I mean, the Jew, the Muslim tailor, he would come every year to take the deity's measurements. And the devotee said, why do you come every year to take the deity's measurements? He said, they change every year. Sometimes they contract, sometimes they say.
huh, really?
Yeah.
There's another.
Beginner's question, I'm afraid.
Sure.
Is the relationship with Krishna always coming out through the deities or also through Guru?
Oh, from many different ways.
As okay, not
Yeah.
only through the deities.
Yeah, many different ways.
Oh, I have another comment. You may think that the deities are looking around, but they're just looking at me. And I've had the experience of asking other devotees, and they have the same experience. They're not looking at you, they're looking at me.
Right.
And I had a dream once well, I won't explain the whole dream, but I was I told my daughter, I woke up and I told my daughter, I was right next to Krishna. And she answered me very, very instructively, basically. That's because Krishna always makes his devotee feel like he's only there for you.
That's the same way it's described in the Bhagavatam with the gopis. During the rasa dance,
Or the gopas.
or the gopas, yeah. Or when he's playing, it's like he's only playing with that particular devotee. So they're completely satisfied because of that. So, yeah. So these are various ways that we can all understand how Krishna reciprocates with his devotees, and he can also reciprocate with you, depending on how greedy you are to obtain love for Krishna. Chaitanya Charitamrita explains that. We all have to be greedy for loving Krishna. The more greedy we are, then the more Krishna will reciprocate with us. And the more he will give us that opportunity to attain that love. Because that's what bhakti is all about, really. Devotional service, but devotion is based on the love we have for offering Krishna our service. That's the essence of it. So, and we're all loving in nature. There's nobody that's not loving. And even the meanest and cruelest person deep inside, either they're calling for love, crying for love, asking for love, begging for love, or expressing love. It's always more advantageous to express love than to cry for it, act it out, or demand it, or whatever. But basically, that is the sum and substance of all our relations within this material world. Except some people just don't know that. They don't realize it. They don't see that basically I'm mean and I'm angry because I'm not getting enough love, or I'm not being able to express my love, or I don't know how to express it. So then they get angry. But that's all it comes down to right there. So if we learn how to express and interact our loving relationship with Krishna, then, hey, problem solved. We just need to go more deeply into that. So anyway, I think we can end there. For those people that are more interested in the type of books I write or the articles I have, there's a lot of people that go on my website or instruct others to go on my website to simply find out, different levels of spiritual knowledge in that regard. So you can use that website for such purposes or to let other people go on it. I'm always expanding it. I'm always writing new books. I just ran into Lakshmi Podar, the photographer, this morning, and he was also saying that he got a real deep question from somebody, and he instructed them and gave them the link to my website And the guy comes back and says, I just found the auspicious key to everything I needed. There was a special Hindi word for that. I forget what it was. But anyway, that's how he interpreted it. So he says that he also uses my website for, so many different, to let so many different people go on there and find out so much different types of knowledge and information. I figure if there's one thing I can do before I die, that is try to keep the nectar flowing as much as possible. That's all I'm living for. So hopefully, if everybody can do the same, because that's basically, I realized that just recently, that the whole reason why Krishna consciousness expands so much or grows so easily is because everybody can participate in letting the nectar of Krishna consciousness flow as easily and as smoothly as possible. Otherwise, it becomes clogged up, where like water, if it's not flowing, it begins to stagnate. So, this is transcendental, of course, but the point of it is, the more the nectar of Krishna consciousness flows in so many different directions, by everything each one of us can do, the more enlivening everybody becomes, the more people become interested, focused on Krishna consciousness, and the more they want to engage in it. And the more we will change this fear-based religion, which dominates much of the world, into a religion based on love and reciprocation, which is the essence of Bhakti Yoga. So thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.